Welcome to the Giddy Goose Show, where stories come alive. In this episode, we bring to you a classic and dearly loved story by Guy de Maupassant called The Necklace. It is a story of the life of Matilda, a simple girl married to a simpleton by the name of Loisel, who loves her dearly. But an unfortunate desire and a misplaced pride threaten their whole way of life. What is the cost they have to pay? Will it all be worth it? Let's find out.
She was one of those pretty and charming girls who are sometimes, as if by a mistake of destiny, born in a family of clerks. She had no savings, no expectations, no means of being known, understood, loved, or wedded by any rich and distinguished man. And she let herself be married to a little clerk at the Ministry of Public Instruction. She dressed plainly because she could not dress well. But she was as unhappy as though she had really fallen from her proper station. She suffered ceaselessly, feeling herself born for all the delicacies and all the luxuries. She suffered from the poverty of her dwelling, from the wretched look of the walls, from the worn-out chairs, and from the ugliness of the curtains. All those things of which another woman of her rank would never have been conscious. It tortured her and made her angry. The sight of the little peasant who did her humble housework, it aroused in her regrets which were despairing and distracted dreams. She dreamt of the silent antechambers hung with oriental tapestry, lit by tall bronze candelabra and with 2 footmen in knee breeches. She dreamt of the long salons fitted up with ancient silk, of the delicate furniture carrying priceless curiosities, and of the coquettish, perfumed sitting rooms made for talks at 5 o'clock with intimate friends, with men famous and sought after. When she sat down to dinner, before the round table covered with a 3-day-old tablecloth, opposite her husband, who uncovered the soup bowl and declared with an enchanted air,
"Ah, the good stew. I don't know anything better than that."
she thought of dainty dinners, of shining silverware and delicious dishes served on marvelous plates, and of the whispered gallantries which you listened to with a smile, while you're eating the pink flesh of a trout or the wings of a quail. But she had no dresses, no jewels, nothing. And she loved nothing but that. She felt made for that. She would so have liked to please, to be envied, to be charming, to be sought after. She had a friend, a former schoolmate at the convent, who was rich, and whom she did not like to go and see anymore because she suffered so much when she came back. One evening, her husband returned home with a triumphant air and holding a large envelope in his hand. He said,
"Here is something for you."
She tore the paper sharply and drew out a printed card that bore these words: "The Minister of Public Instruction and Madame Georges Ramponneau request the honor of your company at the Palace of the Ministry on Monday evening, January the 18th. Instead of being delighted, as her husband hoped, she threw the invitation on the table with disdain, murmuring, "What do you want me to do with that?"
"But, my dear, I thought you would be glad. You never go out. And this is such a fine opportunity. I had awful trouble to get it. Everyone wants to go. It is very select. And they're not giving many invitations to clerks. The whole official world will be there.
She looked at him with an irritated eye, and she said impatiently, "And what do you want me to put on my back?" He had not thought of that. He stammered,
Oh, why? The dress you go to the theatre in, it looks very good to me.
He stopped, distracted, seeing that his wife was crying. Two great tears descended slowly from the corners of her eyes towards the corners of her mouth. He stuttered,
What's the matter? What's the matter?
but by a violent effort she had conquered her grief, and she replied with a calm voice while she wiped her wet cheeks, "Nothing. Only I have no dress, and therefore I can't go to this ball. Give your card to some colleague whose wife is better equipped than I." He was in despair. He resumed,
Come, let us see, Matilda. How much would it cost? A suitable dress, which you could use on other occasions? Something very simple?
She reflected for several seconds, making her calculations and wondering also what sum she could ask without drawing on herself an immediate refusal and a frightened exclamation from the economic clerk. Finally, she replied hesitatingly, I don't know exactly, but I think I could manage it with 400 francs. He had grown a little pale because he was laying aside just that amount to buy a gun and treat himself to a little shooting next summer with friends. But he said,
All right, I will give you 400 francs.
The day of the ball drew near, and Madame Loisel seemed sad, uneasy, anxious, although her dress was ready. Her husband said to her one evening,
What is the matter? You've been so strange these last 3 days.
And she answered, It annoys me not to have a single jewel, not a single stone, nothing to put on. I should almost rather not go at all. He resumed,
You might wear natural flowers. It's very stylish at this time of the year. For 10 francs, you can get 2 or 3 magnificent roses.
She was not convinced. No, there's nothing more humiliating than to look poor among other women who are rich. But her husband cried,
How stupid you are. Go look up your friend Madame Forestier and ask her to lend you some jewels. You're thick enough with her to do that.
She uttered a cry of joy. It's true. I never thought of it. The next day, she went to her friend and told her of her distress. Madame Forestier went to a wardrobe with a glass door, took out a large jewel box, and said to Madame Loisel, Choose, my dear. She saw, first of all, some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, then a Venetian cross, gold, and precious stones of admirable workmanship. She tried on the ornaments before the glass, hesitated, but could not make up her mind. Then, all of a sudden, she discovered in a black satin box a superb necklace of diamonds, and her heart began to beat with an immoderate desire. Her hands trembled as she took it. She fastened it around her throat, outside her high-necked dress, and remained lost in ecstasy at the sight of herself. Then she asked, hesitating, filled with anguish, Can you lend me that? Only that? Why, yes, certainly. She sprang upon the neck of her friend, kissed her passionately, then fled with her treasure. The day of the ball arrived. Madame Loisel was a great success. She was prettier than them all, elegant, gracious, smiling, and crazy with joy. All the men looked at her, asked her name, and endeavored to be introduced. She was remarked by the minister himself. She danced with intoxication, with passion, made drunk by pleasure, forgetting all in the triumph of her beauty, in the glory of her success, in a cloud of happiness composed of all this homage, of all this admiration, of all these awakened desires, and of that sense of complete victory that is so sweet to a woman's heart. She was done about 4 o'clock in the morning. Her husband had been sleeping since midnight in a little deserted waiting room. He threw over her shoulders the wraps that he had brought, modest wraps of common life, whose poverty contrasted with the elegance of the ball dress. She felt this and wanted to escape, so as not to be noticed by the other women who were enveloping themselves in costly furs. Loisel held her back. "Wait a bit. I will go and call a cab." But she did not listen to him and rapidly descended the stairs. When they were in the street, they did not find a carriage. They went down towards the river in despair, shivering with cold. At last, they found one of those ancient carriages that took them to their door. And once more, sadly, they climbed up homeward. She removed the wraps which covered her shoulders before the glass, so as once more to see herself in all her glory. But suddenly, she uttered a cry. She no longer had the necklace around her neck. Her husband, already half undressed, asked,
"What is the matter with you?"
She turned madly towards him. I've lost Madame Forestier's necklace." He stood up, distracted.
"What? How? Impossible!"
And they looked in the folds of her dress, in the folds of her cloak, in her pockets, everywhere. They did not find it. He asked,
"You're sure you had it on when you left the ball?"
"Yes, I felt it in the vestibule of the palace."
"But if you had lost it in the street, we should have heard it fall. It must be in the cab."
"Yes, probably. Did you take his number?"
"No. And you? Didn't you notice it?"
"No." They looked, thunderstruck, at one another. At last, Loisel put on his clothes. He said,
"I shall go back on foot over the whole route which we have taken to see if I can find it."
And he went out. She sat, waiting on a chair, in her ball dress, without the strength to go to bed, overwhelmed. Her husband came back at about 7 o'clock. He had found nothing. He went to police headquarters, to the newspaper offices, to offer a reward. He went to the cab companies, everywhere. She waited all day in the same condition of mad fear before this terrible calamity. Loisel returned at night with a hollow, pale face. He had discovered nothing. He said,
"You must write to your friend that you have broken the clasp of her necklace and are having it mended. That will give us time to turn around."
At the end of a week, they had lost all hope. And Loisel, who seemed to have aged 5 years, declared,
"We must consider how to replace that ornament."
The next day, they took the box which had contained it, and they went to the jeweler whose name was found within. He consulted his books.
It was not I, madame, who sold that necklace. I must have simply furnished the case.
Then they went from jeweler to jeweler, searching for a necklace like the other, consulting their memories, both of them sick with anguish. They found in a shop at the Palace Royal a string of diamonds that seemed to them exactly like the one they looked for. It was worth 40,000 francs. They could have it for 36. So they begged the jeweler not to sell it for 3 days yet. And they made a bargain that he should buy it back for 34,000 francs in case they found the other one before the end of February. Loisel possessed 18,000 francs which his father had left him. He would borrow the rest. He did borrow, asking 1,000 francs of one, 500 of another, 5 here, 3 there. He gave notes, took up ruinous obligations, and dealt with all the races of lenders. He compromised all the rest of his life, risked his signature without even knowing if he could meet it. And frightened by the black misery which was about to fall upon him, he went to get the new necklace, putting down upon the merchant's counter 36,000 francs. When Madame Loisel took back the necklace, Madame Forestier said to her with a chilly manner, "You should have returned it sooner. I might have needed it." She did not open the case, as her friend had so feared. If she had detected the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she have not taken Madame Loisel for a thief? Madame Loisel now knew the horrible existence of the needy. She knew that the dreadful debt must be paid. They dismissed their servant, changed their lodgings, rented the attic. She came to know what heavy housework meant and the odious cares of the kitchen. She washed the dishes, using her rosy nails on the greasy pots and pans. She washed the dirty linen, the shirts and the dishcloths which she had dried upon a line. And dressed like a commoner, she went to the grocer and the butcher, her basket on her arm, bargaining, insulted, defending her miserable money, penny by penny. Her husband worked in the evening, making a fair copy of some tradesman's accounts, and late at night he often copied manuscripts for 5 pennies a page. And this life lasted 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they had paid everything, with the rates of lender and the accumulation of the compound interest. Madame Loisel looked old now, with frowsy hair, skirts askew, and red hands. She talked loudly while washing the floor with great swishes of water. But sometimes, when her husband was at office, she sat down near the window and thought of that happy evening, of that ball where she had been so beautiful and so feted. What would have happened if she had not lost that necklace? Who knows how life is strange and changeful? How little a thing is needed for us to be lost or to be saved. One Sunday evening, having gone to take a walk at the Champs-Élysées to refresh herself, she suddenly saw a woman who was leading a child. It was Madame Forestier, still young, still beautiful, still charming. Madame Loisel felt moved. Was she going to speak to her? Yes, certainly. And now that she had paid, she was going to tell her all about it. Why not? She went up. "Good day, Jean." The other woman, astonished to be familiarly addressed by this plain good wife, did not recognize her at all and stammered, "But, madam, I do not know. You must be mistaken." "No, I am Matilda Loisel," her friend uttered a cry. "Oh, my poor Matilda, how you have changed." "Yes, I have had hard days since I have seen you. Wretched days. And that's because of you." "Of me? How so?" "Do you remember that diamond necklace which you lent me to wear at the ministerial ball?" "Yes. Well?" "Well, I lost it." "What do you mean? You brought it back?" "Oh, but I brought you back another one, just like it. And for this, we have been paying for 10 years. You can understand that it was not easy for us who had nothing. At last it is over, and I am very glad." Madame Forestier had stopped. "You say that you bought a necklace of diamonds to replace mine?" "Yes. You never noticed it then? They were very similar." And she smiled with a joy which was proud and naive at once. Madame Forestier, strongly moved, took her two hands. "Oh, my poor Matilda! Why, my necklace was fake. It was worth at most 500 francs.
Hope you liked the story. If yes, tell your friends about us and stay tuned for the next episode. Until then, stay well.